Hi everyone. Thank you, Henry, for this greetings from Beirut. I'm sure in the room there's enough expertise to talk about security and also other political issues. But I was told that I have 10 minutes that I should focus on the economic side in these 10 minutes. Talking about politics will certainly take much longer than that. So briefly, there's some official rationale behind plans to deploy nuclear power in Saudi Arabia. This official rationale is not different actually between different countries, including Iran in the region. Primarily claims that nuclear is cost effective. Because it adds or contributes to having a diversified energy portfolio. Also, there's a talk about nuclear being a highly skilled domain that would create highly skilled jobs and expertise of the country. So the first question that we'd like to look at is the nuclear cost effective? So I'm sure many in the room perhaps know that what has been the trend of energy cost over the past years. When we compare nuclear to renewable energy, this is not in the region, this is global average of the liberalized cost of electricity produced by solar, photovoltaic, utility scale, wind, and also nuclear. And you can really see a diverging trend that the cost of renewable has been declining, particularly solar PV has been declining in a very strong manner, and also projected to continue to decline. By 2040, solar PV cost will drop by another 66% and wind by 70%. On the other hand, we see the cost of nuclear increasing as well. I mean, it's not staying the same, but also increasing because of the cost of adding new safety measures, the cost of delays in multiple projects around the world. So just one thought on this slide before I move on is that a few years back, the whole renewable industry was excited that renewables actually reached what the so-called grid parity. By that I mean that the cost of renewable is matched the cost paid by the end user. But now actually we are moving beyond this point. Now solar PV and also wind are becoming much economically competitive. That we see really now a big trend in the region to capitalize on these cost reductions. So the previous slide was global average, but the Middle East actually is playing a very special role in the success story of renewables, particularly in Saudi Arabia. So these are, what you see on this slide are 3 projects, recent projects. What is special about these projects is that they have broken world records. And by the way, their cost and the PPA, power purchasing agreement cost was the lowest in the world when the agreement was signed or the tender was closed. So one particular project you can see is actually in Saudi Arabia. It was 300 megawatt solar PV project, and the price that was settled by the end of the bidding process was 2.3 cents per kilowatt hour. This is very low. But this is not actually the story. The story is that this is not the lowest price that Saudi Arabia received. The lowest price received by Saudi Arabia was around 1.7 cents per kilowatt hour. And for those of you who are aware or know a little bit about energy costs, electricity costs, this is ridiculously cheap. This is really going into a completely new league or a completely new area of costs. So the costs were so low that the Saudis, they had the luxury to choose actually the second lowest grid, and they chose it because it was led by a Saudi company, Nonproliferation, which is also a very successful company that is involved in many projects in the region but also in the world. Right. So comparing solar to nuclear, these are, I think, this is an important slide where you can see in the blue the levelized cost of nuclear projects in the region as published by the respective governments. The green are the renewable energy projects PPA costs. And because they are PPA costs, basically they are higher than the levelized cost. Otherwise, these companies will not make a profit. So even with the PPA cost, if you compare PPA cost of nuclear, you can see that for the cost per megawatt hour or kilowatt hour for renewables is already now cheaper than nuclear. One interesting case is the case of the United Arab Emirates, because the United Arab Emirates is about to connect its first reactors to the grid. They are now constructing 4 of them. I think the first 1 or 2 are now under testing process. So they started in 2012, and when they started their nuclear projects, admittedly the cost of renewables, solar, wind were high, but look what happened. So just 1 or 2 years after, the cost of renewable dropped dramatically, and so you can think of, if you are in these governments, you can think of an opportunity cost that is really related to the time it takes to build a nuclear power plant. For example, a lot of people, when we compare nuclear to solar, they compare it on today's values or costs, which is not correct, because it takes 1 year or 2 years to build a solar project, but it takes 8 to 10 years to build a nuclear project. And it has taken Emirates approximately 10 years to do so, since they have taken the decision to build the nuclear power plant. So, if we, for the argument's sake, if we think that Saudi Arabia has already agreed to build a nuclear power plant today, it will not be operational until 10 years in the future. So any comparison has to be in the future. But even on today's values, you can see that solar is very competitive. Both solar PV, but also more increasingly solar thermal, which allows for up to 6 or 8 hours of storage, which also changes the argument about base load. I'll go, I think Henry mentioned this, I'll just go quickly, the challenge of financing. Yes, Saudi Arabia has a lot of financial resources, but the decline in oil prices or any prospect of future decline of oil prices is really challenging this, and we have seen its impact over the past 3 years. So the fact that they have money does not mean that they should spend it on the most expensive option. But also you have a lot of other issues that are related to the decision-making process and the risks involved in these projects. So I and also here our program at the American University of Beirut, we have really studied the economics of nuclear power in the context of the Middle East extensively, and we have been doing this for the past 5-6 years. And what we conclude is that in the short term, what makes sense, not only for Saudi Arabia, for all the countries in the Middle East that aspire to have nuclear, is that they don't need nuclear. Their short-term needs can be met by a combination of natural gas to mainly provide base load, and solar for the peak load. And the reason for that is that if you look at the profiles of solar insolation and the profile of energy consumption, they are almost identical. So the peak of energy consumption in the GCC, for example, is midday, and the peak of solar insolation is also midday. And they differ accordingly as well. So we have done a couple of studies on that recently. A study was released on Saudi Arabia, is that we concluded that solar at least can cover the peak load of the country. Long term, I think talking about long term, you have to incorporate storage. We also, similar to the cost of renewables, we see that the cost of storage is also making substantial leaps towards reduced cost as well. And when you incorporate other ideas such as smart grids, interwater connections, and also look at the demand side, like we talk supply, but also I think an easier thing to do is to actually try to reduce demand. And those in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf in general, the energy per capita is one of the highest in the world. And certainly more work needs to be done on reforms, on removing subsidies, and also this will contribute towards lowering their energy needs. Just quickly, I think one thing that when I interview people here in the region about the nuclear projects, I hear the word energy security almost in every sentence, and often it's the first answer they give you. Well, we need a diversified energy portfolio. But here's the question, like, does nuclear really improve energy security or not? I think in my opinion, their understanding of energy security is a faulty one, because energy, unlike 1970s, when we had the Arab oil embargo and we have countries like fearing for resources, now energy security definition goes beyond resources. It's no longer about oil or gas or uranium or any commodity. It's about energy now globally is a connected system. We see an American company owned by Japanese shareholders operating in Asia. So we have a certain complexity in the energy system that makes it very hard really to grasp. But when we talk about energy security, arguably we can think of 4 parameters that they should be present in order at least to be sure that you are, well, relatively secure. The first one is that you have technology, or you have control over the technology, you have a right human capacity, you have financing abilities, and you have the fuel. In the case of nuclear uranium, for example. My question here is that, for example, if you take the case of Jordan, if the Russians, for whatever reason, I mean, by the way, I think there's a big question mark, and I think it's more unlikely now that the Russian proposal will continue. But anyway, just for the argument's sake, if you imagine the Russians leaving for any reason, can the Jordanians deal with potential emergency situations operating the reactors? I'm not saying that they don't have the capabilities or they won't have the capabilities in the future, of course not. But what I'm saying is that nuclear expertise or nuclear industry is a mature industry, and these countries have accumulated knowledge over decades and decades of operating the nuclear reactors. How can we expect Jordan or any other country to really learn all this in just a few years? I think I'll skip this, but there's also the question about localization. I think localization also brings its own challenges, and it's not as straightforward, or it's not as they hope regarding nuclear. I will stop here just to respect time, and we'll have perhaps allow some time for questions as well.